guys, and welcome back to another Lost Bits video right here on TetraBitGaming, the series where we take a look at the unused, scrapped, and unseen content in gaming. It's been a hot minute since I made my last Kirby video on the channel. Yeah, a minute to the tune of several years to be somewhat more exact, so I think it's time for another. And this time, I'm not going to be taking the pink puffball alone for once, as I'm going to be joined by the Kirby internet funny man, AntDude.
Hello, that's me. In this video, we're going to be talking all things Kirby and all things unused in the original Dreamland trilogy. Wow, man, a 3-in-1 special. I gotta tell you guys are getting it pretty good.
And with all of that said, it's time to puff up and get flapping to find some Kirby's Dreamland lost bits. Alright, so starting things off, we have Kirby's first ever game, Kirby's Dreamland for the Game Boy. And first, we got some important pre-release history to go over.
So before Kirby was known as Kirby, he was originally given the name Po, which was going to be the contrasting name to DDD. Wait, that actually makes a whole lot of sense.
I know, right? And before the game was known as Kirby's Adventure, it was actually known as the much more epic sounding Twinkle Popo. Yeah, I'm not surprised it was changed. Then, before its initial planned release, when the game caught the eye of Shigeru Miyamoto, he forced HAL to stop development, as he felt the game had much more potential than the state it was currently in, especially if Nintendo published it rather than HAL. Then, just over a year later, the character and game title was renamed to what we know it as today.
Interestingly, there are still several pre-release screenshots out there in which the original Po name is seen as part of the game's graphics. And furthermore, there's an alleged prototype build of the game floating around somewhere too.
I was only able to find a picture of it being played, its title screen, as well as what apparently is its cartridge. That said, I don't think this has been dumped online, as I haven't been able to find a ROM of it anywhere, and I don't think it has been verified as an authentic prototype, so until it is, I guess I'll remain just cautiously optimistic. Anyways, let's get to the actual game itself. First, on top of other more basic and obvious regional differences, such as localizing text and title card graphics, the Japanese version of the configuration menu uses unique graphics for the life bar option.
The international version uses the same one as seen in the game when normally playing it, so it's kinda strange to see here. Our money is on this maybe being some early version of the health meter.
Another major change between regional releases is that due to the much larger size of the title card in the international release, the green's background from the Japanese version was completely removed. And yeah, I get the reasoning, but I think the background was a really nice touch in that version.
Then, as far as actual unused content left over in the game is concerned, there's unfortunately only 3 unused graphics here. Firstly, we have this unused sprite of whaddya looking up, this thought to have been once intended to be used when they charge up their lasers or when Kirby was right above them. And then the other unused graphics are both for big ol' King DDD. Both of these sprites feature the king facing the player in what appears to be a shocked and frightened state. Although it's not 100% certain due to the darker coloring of these sprites, it's thought that these were intended to be used as the boss introduction for DDD from the darker side of the wrestling ring.
Now moving on to Kirby's Dreamland 2, we again got some more regional changes and cuts between the different versions. The title screen was changed yet again, yeah sure, pretty standard stuff, but a big notable change between the Japanese and international releases is the complete removal and replacement of a character. So in the Japanese release, one of the friends that can be unboxed in the Kirby loot bags in the game was this girl character known as Chao. Now Chao is actually from another game called Yuyuki for the Famicom Disk System. Yuyuki was never released outside of Japan, so I imagine the developers wanted to swap in a new character that could be, I guess, more relevant in the international releases.
So enter this female version of GUI. This alternate GUI completely replaced Chao in all of the aspects of the game, including the boss endurance and the bonus sub-game results screen, as well as in the test menu where they are seen playing a piano. And fun fact, this sound test image is actually a direct reference to a scene from Yuyuki.
Eventually, Chao would make a return to the Kirby series in all regional releases of Dreamland 3, where she is seen in the 4th stage with her friend Goku. Then, whereas Dreamland 1 only had some unused graphics, Dreamland 2 only has 1 track of unused audio. Here, let's have a listen. Though it can be heard in the game's sound test, it never actually gets implemented anywhere, and it wouldn't be until years later it would get repurposed into the track The Cave in the Sky, heard in Kirby Triple Deluxe. So yeah, just like we've seen with Pokemon here on Lost Bits, it's not atypical of Nintendo to reuse stuff that was once scrapped years later.
And last up, of course, we have Kirby's Dreamland 3, and being a Super Nintendo game rather than a Game Boy one, it's no surprise there is a lot more to cover in this installment.
Once again, starting with some regional differences. First, in this Botch Butch screen, the international version scrapped this Nintendo 16 graphic, originally seen at the top in the Japanese release. This is an obvious spoof of the Nintendo 64 logo, as the Super Nintendo was only 16-bit compared to the Nintendo 64's 64. It's a little charming joke, I wish they would have kept it.
Then in the Japanese version of Dreamland 3, the game actually uses the original Nintendo logo in Japanese kanji, which was used from the company's founding in 1889 all the way up until 1950. This is something rarely seen, even in Japanese regional releases.
And although both releases saw these graphics animated, only the Japanese title card for the game was animated, while the international one kinda just sits there. Kinda feeling ripped off here.
Dreamland 3 also has a single audio track that goes unused known as K3 Boss 2. This is actually a remix of the music from the Egg Catcher minigame from Kirby's Adventure, and based on the name of this track, it appears to have been once planned as background music for a boss fight. Let's have ourselves a quick listen.
And last up for this video, I'm pleased to say that Kirby's Dreamland 3 has some surprisingly robust debugging features left over. 7 whole pages here worth, in fact, so let's get to them. First, here is the BG toggle, which when enabled will display all background collision points in the game. OBJ here does something really similar, only this time with collision with other sprites in the foreground. Renew does, again, basically the same thing, only this allows for more collision points to be displayed.
Then the pause toggle here will enable the players to freeze the game completely when pressing start rather than bringing up the regular pause menu, and then after doing so, the game can be advanced frame by pressing the R button. Next up, we have the level and stage selection, which, as you would expect, lets you select a world and a stage to instantly load to. Pretty nifty if you just want to get to a level quickly.
Since there are only 5 worlds in the game, with 6 here being the final boss stage, Level 6 and T have other things to load into, such as the game's minigames, the boss rush, the opening cutscene but in a playable format, but you're also a glitchy boy, and even some unused areas and test rooms, but we'll save that for later in the video. Additionally, T3 here loads the player into a strange, otherwise inaccessible stage, which seems to be a blend of 1-4 and 1-5. We have the mid-boss fight from 1-4, but then there's also this section that looks like it's from 1-5. It's quite strange. Then back to the debug menu, T2, 4, 5, 6, and B all just crash the game, so that's real good. Moving on, stock allows the user to choose the amount of lives they want to have in the game, and similarly, Kirby allows you to choose how much health you want Kirby to start with, including I, which stands for infinite health. GUI does the same thing, but with GUI's health, of course. BG bar doesn't seem to have any effect. Then unit's purpose isn't quite known, but setting it to slow really does tend to slow the game down. Go figure.
Next up, pages 3, 4, and 5 in this debug menu all act as save file editors. In these, you can change the progress of every save file. You can set which stages are cleared, as well as which options are unlocked in the file select screen. S for sound test, M for the MG5 subgame, B is Boss Butch, G is the jumping minigame, and E is the cutscene selection menu.
Then page 6 is Music Room, which, as the name suggests, is basically just another sound test. Here, the only difference, however, is that the file names for some of the songs are also listed. And then lastly, on page 7, we have Autoplay Demo. This apparently is believed to have been used to record player movements, which would then be used for the demo screen seen on the title screen. However, it doesn't seem to work as intended in the retail release, and can even sometimes result in the game deleting all save data. And finally, as a little bonus here, I guess, when holding down the L and R buttons on the title screen, the build date of the release build shows up on screen. And from that, we can see that this version was apparently built on August 18th, 1997 at 6 o'clock.
And finally, we have the best for last. We got not one, not two, but 3 unused and normally inaccessible areas left over. First up, let's get to the more basic one here. Loading in takes us to a room consisting of really basic red and black level geometry, as well as a variation of the background from the 5th level of World 1. And you better get used to that red terrain, because we're gonna be seeing a lot of it.
Anyways, yeah, all that's in this room is just a single door. And this door just takes us to another similar room with another single door, which then takes us back to the title screen. Since there's not much going on here, I can only assume this debug area was to test functions of doors and loading between different areas. Yeah, that's about it, so let's move on. Okay, now on to the real good stuff. The next debug area starts us off in a strange room with several spikes everywhere, as well as a few doors. These placeholder spikes were obviously used to test how Kirby reacts to spikes, but there's also this area in the middle which I couldn't fit through even when sliding, so I'm not too sure what that was for. Anyways, one of the doors leads us to an area with some platforms and slopes, but the main focus here appears to be the pool of water at the end, as well as the Shotzo cannon enemies all placed on some placeholder looking star blocks. I guess this could have been used for testing how enemies fall once the tiles beneath them disappear. The next door here leads us to an area with several placeholder pass-through platforms and slopes. Also, of course, as you can see, there are 3 animal friends here, Kine, Ku, and Nago. I think it's pretty obvious this room was to test walking along different slope angles, as well as passing through them, probably with and without the animal friends.
The final door in this test area leads us to yet another room with some platforms and Nago, only this time there are more doors for us to go through. The first one just takes you back to the starting room, but the other door takes us to even more terrain testing. We got some more terrain at different grades here, some you can pass through and some you can't, some treacherous water, slippery terrain, opposite of slippery terrain, some conveyor styled blocks, again in different angles and directions, and finally at the very end, yet another door, but this one, unfortunately, doesn't actually work. So yeah, that's fun.
And last, but absolutely not least, no really, there's a lot here, is a massive test area with numerous sub-areas found within it. Now the first area we load into contains several doors, each with, I guess, a theme behind it, and I can't read Japanese, but I assume each character above the door probably designates what it is, at least briefly. And as always, if you know what these characters mean, let us know down in the comments. Anyways, first room up brings us to another room with the original 3 animal friends. Then in this next room, we got a door that leads us to another area that we'll come back to later. This door here takes us back to the starting room. And then we also got this door that contains another room with the 3 new animal friends introduced in this game. Based on seeing all the animal friends here, I'm pretty sure these rooms were just meant to test the animal friend mechanics. Then next up, this door leads us to more doors. Yay, and lots of them. Now this is actually an enemy test area, and each of these doors leads us to another room with an assortment of usually 4 enemies or sometimes obstacles. It was pretty fun to bounce around the different rooms and see all the enemies quickly, but oftentimes the enemy selection in a given room felt a bit too dissimilar. Overall though, still pretty cool.
This next door here leads us to a room with a single enemy behind a wall. Since that's all there is to do here, we can only assume that this room was used to test Kirby's ability to suck up an enemy through a wall. Not really sure what else it could be, really. And then, oh, you'll never see it coming, this next door leads us to, you guessed it, even more doors.
The far left door here just connects us back to the friend test rooms. But then starting at the top left here, the first room is just a long corridor with placeholder looking blocks that require a fire move to destroy. Did I mention this was a long corridor? 'Cause it is. A bit too long, if you ask me. Then the next door just leads us to a small area with a single slope. I'd imagine maybe to test how Rock Kirby rolls down it or something. Anyways, then the left middle door here leads us to an area that tests several enemies. Now these enemies all appear to be ones that have a mechanic of grabbing the player, including Mr. Creepy Face Boy here. The middle door is another block test room, as several types of blocks can be found here, each I assume to be destroyed by a different type of copy ability. These placeholder blocks again have Japanese text on them, so I wasn't really sure what exactly I needed to break each type, but I'm sure that's what this is. The next door leads us to basically the same room again, only this time the blocks are arranged in a U shape.
Now moving on to the bottom row, the first door leads to an area with some small angled conveyor belt type terrain, again just to test how they would work at different angles. The second door leads to a water area to test how the character behaves in water. The third door leads to a variety of more sloped terrain assets, and another unusable door, nothing we haven't seen already. Then finally in this little group, this door here takes us to an area with a few gaps to fly up, as well as an area that only allows Kirby to run through by himself. I guess this might have been an area to test collision differences between Kirby with an animal friend and Kirby by himself, and I also assume these bottom 4 doors were all centered around just more terrain testing.
Then to the right of the star door here, which just takes us back to the starting debug room, these 2 doors lead to rooms that test the game's water current mechanics. The first, horizontal moving currents, and then the second one, currents moving upward. Following suit, the next door in the main debug area leads us again to a collection of more doors, and these all deal with air currents this time. Each room here basically just has an area testing currents in different directions. You pretty much have to come here with Coo the Owl, otherwise many of these rooms will just result in a soft lock, as Kirby can't fly against the wind alone. Moving on, you know the drill, one door leads to more doors. Surprise, surprise. The first one here is just another small area with different inclines and a 2-way platform, and then the second is much more interesting as it contains a mountain of little star pieces as well as a stack of 1-ups. Now you could say I've felt a lot of good things in my day, but damn, grabbing that stack of 1-ups, that felt good. And the last door here leads us to, I guess, an item testing room, as 4 different items appear here in just a floating variety, as well as being held up by 2 star blocks. Pretty nifty, I guess.
This next door just leads to a test for the end of level jumping minigame. Pretty self-explanatory there. Then this door leads us to a collection of more doors, which then lead to a test fight with each of the game's mid-bosses. And finally, the last door in this debug room has a big old B over it, which I guess stands for boss, because similar to the last one, this door leads to a collection of more doors, each of which lead to one of the game's main bosses. These last 2 are super handy for just getting into boss fights with no fuss, and that's nice.
Whew, and those are all the debug and test rooms in Dreamland 3. It's been a while since we've been graced with a game here on Lost Bits with so many testing rooms. You know, I love this stuff. It's always so fun to mess around in these rooms, and this game was certainly no exception. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, special thanks to AntDude for helping out, so be sure to check out his channel. I'll have it linked down for you in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a bit.